Okay, hello everyone. Once again, welcome back to our class. So today we are going to continue from chapter 4, slope of demand curve and its causes. Okay, it's very interesting and quite easy once you get the logic. So I request all of you to watch the video till the end. Okay, so those who have your textbook, you can turn it to page number 38. First, we will discuss what is a demand curve. Demand curve is a graphical representation of a demand schedule. Okay, now demand curve slope downward from left to right because of inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Inverse means opposite to each other. I repeat again, a demand curve is a graphical representation of the demand schedule. Demand curve slope downward from left to right because of inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. That means when price falls, demand increase. When price rise, demand falls. And that is quite relevant even in our day-to-day life, right? So now we will explain with the help of diagram given in your textbook. So for those who have your textbook, you can turn it to page number 38. Here you see price is an independent variable and is shown on the y-axis. Quantity demanded is a dependent variable and is shown on the x-axis. Now, when price of a commodity is at rupees 40, consumer is buying only 2 units of good. But when price falls to rupees 32, consumer is demanding 3 units of good. And when price again falls to rupees 24, consumer is buying 4 units of good. And again, when price falls to rupees 16, consumer is buying 5 units of good. And lastly, when price falls to 8, that is lowest price, consumer is buying 6 units of good, isn't it? So from the diagram, clearly we can make it out that there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. That means when one increase, other falls. When one decrease, other rise, isn't it? It is because as a rational consumer, as a rational human being, when price falls, we tend to buy more goods, and when price rise, we tend to buy less goods, isn't it? So this is enough for 1 mark, okay? If the question is asked, why does demand curve slope downward from left to right, or what is the slope of demand curve, then your answer will be demand curve is a downward sloping from left to right because of inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. Okay, I hope that is clear, right? Okay, but now you see there are also other reasons why demand curve slope downward from left to right. Okay, and those are law of diminishing marginal utility is given here, law of diminishing marginal utility, income effect, and substitution effect. Okay, now we will explain this in detail. For that, you can turn to page number 40 in your textbook. Now you see, in order to understand and learn economics, you have to remember so many concepts, each and every words. Okay, now first we will see what is law of diminishing marginal utility. Diminishing means decreasing. Marginal here means change or additional or extra. Okay, keep that in mind. It is also represented by this sign. We also call it as delta. Okay, delta, not triangle. Okay, so marginal means change, extra or additional. Okay, and utility means the satisfaction that a consumer derives or gets from consumption of a good or a commodity. Okay, the satisfaction that a consumer gets from consuming a good or a commodity. Okay, so under this law of diminishing marginal utility, it states that when a consumer consumes additional units of good, his or her satisfaction will diminish slowly. It means when we human beings consume additional good or extra good, then our satisfaction will decrease one after another. Say for example, when we are very hungry, when we had one chapati, then in the first place, we will get maximum satisfaction, isn't it? But if we go for second chapati, our satisfaction will decrease. And if we go for the third chapati, again our satisfaction will decrease. Our additional satisfaction will decrease, and finally it will come to zero and negative, right? So that is law of diminishing marginal utility, okay? So now coming to the textbook, demand for a commodity depends on its utility or usefulness to the consumer. Let us take an example of ourselves. Let us suppose if we get more satisfaction, we will pay more, and if we get less satisfaction, we will buy additional units only at a lower price. Since additional units give us less and less satisfaction, we will buy them only at a lower price. And this is the law of demand, which states that demand for a commodity is more at a lower price and less at a higher price. It is therefore rightly said that the demand curve is downward sloping because of law of diminishing marginal utility. So here, in order to understand this particular paragraph, first you have to remember demand curve slope downward from left to right, because when price increase, our demand falls, isn't it? So here, when we say law of diminishing marginal utility, means it is relating to additional units of good that we consume, right? The satisfaction that we derive from consuming an additional or extra units of good, right? So here it says that if the additional units of good that we consume gives us less utility, then we will buy them. We will buy more goods, we will buy extra goods or commodity only at a lower price, okay? I hope that is clear, right? So that is why law of demand curve or demand curve slope downward, because of law of diminishing marginal utility, okay? I hope that is clear. Okay, now the second point is income effect. Okay, what is income effect? This refers to change in a quantity demanded when real income of the buyer changes as a result of change in price of a commodity. For example, when price of a commodity falls, less money has to be spent on purchase of that commodity. With money that we save, a consumer can buy more quantity of that good. Thus, a fall in price increases the real income in terms of goods and services of a consumer, with the result that we buy more when price falls. That means, say for example, today we are buying 1 kg of potato at rupees 40 or 50, okay, say 40 or 50. Now, when the price of a potato is rupees 40 or 50, we are buying only 1 kg of potato per day. But tomorrow, if the price of potato per kg falls rupees 20 or 30, then now we have more money to spend, isn't it? Which means we might increase our spending on buying potatoes, right? So here, we observe that because of fall in price of a commodity, our real income to purchase goods and services also increase. That is why demand curve also slope downward from left to right because of income effect. Okay, I hope that is clear enough, right? Okay, lastly, substitution effect. When we say substitution effect, means substituting a cheaper commodity for the relatively expensive commodity is called substitution effect. That means when a cheaper commodity is substituted by a relative substitute commodity, then relatively expensive commodity, then we call it as substitution effect, okay? Say for example, rise in the price of a commodity, say coffee, also means that price of its substitute say tea has fallen in relation to that of coffee, even though the price of tea remains unchanged. As a result, if people buy more of tea and less of coffee, it will be a case of substitution effect since coffee has been substituted by tea. This part of increase in demand is substitution effect. Okay, now I will show you with an example. You see, there are two substitute goods, say tea and coffee. Okay, now when we say substitution effect, means substituting a cheaper commodity for the relatively expensive commodity. So we are taking an example of substitute goods, say tea and coffee. tea and coffee. Okay. Okay. So let's say on day 1, both the price of tea and coffee is rupees 10 each. But on day 2, say price of coffee rise to rupees 20 and tea remains same as 10. Now you got my point. Say on day 1, both the price of tea and coffee is rupees 10. But on day 2, price of coffee rise to rupees 20 and tea remain constant at rupees 10. Now what we will do as a rational consumer, we will buy more of tea and less of coffee, isn't it? Yes or no? Even if price of tea remain constant, since the price of each substitute good, coffee has rise to rupees 20, now a rational consumer will buy more of tea than coffee, isn't it? Which means because of fall in price, a consumer is buying more of that good comparing to the other expensive goods, isn't it? So this is also another reason why demand curve slope downward from left to right. Okay, let me read again for all of us. Listen it carefully. See, for example, rise in the price of commodities, say coffee, to rupees 20. Okay, also means that price of each substitute tea, say tea has fallen. That means even if price of tea remain constant at rupees 10, since the price of